If you are looking at a photograph of a smiling, newly blended family, you are most likely looking at a statistical tragedy in motion. Most people believe that the hardest part of a divorce is the divorce itself. They think the first marriage was the painful trial run, the harsh lesson that finally taught them what love, boundaries, and stability are supposed to look like. So when they find someone new, when they decide to merge two broken households into one, they breathe a massive sigh of relief. They believe the worst is behind them. They believe the second time is the charm. But the math tells a terrifyingly different story. 67% of second marriages end in divorce. Let that sink in. If you are blending a family right now, you are significantly more likely to fail this time around than you were the first time. As a parent, this is your ultimate nightmare. You fought desperately to protect your children from the fallout of your first split. You swore you would never subject them to that kind of earth-shattering instability again. You have invested every ounce of your emotional energy into making this new chapter work. You organized the careful introductions, you scheduled the weekly family dinners, and you painted over the deep emotional scars with relentless optimism. You built a narrative that this new partner is the missing puzzle piece that will finally make your family whole again. Society actively encourages this delusion. We are fed this romanticized myth that a new partner will seamlessly integrate into the emotional wreckage of a previously broken home. The movies tell you it is going to be a beautiful, slightly chaotic, but ultimately triumphant journey. But society is lying to you. Blending a family is not a heartwarming sitcom where time and affection magically erase the trauma of the past. It is a brutal act of trauma integration. You are taking children who have just watched the foundational structure of their universe collapse, and you are forcing them to share their most intimate safe spaces with complete strangers. You are asking them to accept a new authority figure while their biological parent casts a massive, inescapable shadow over your new living room. And as a deeply invested parent, you are walking into this highly volatile ecosystem totally blind. You are so desperate for a second chance at happiness, so terrified of failing your kids twice, that you completely ignore the subtle fractures forming right beneath your feet. You mistake a child's silence for acceptance. You mistake their exhaustion for healing. You look at the beautifully curated wedding photos, you see everyone smiling in matching outfits, and you convince yourself that the hardest work is finally done. The truth is, the honeymoon phase of a blended family is a complete illusion. The countdown clock to a second collapse hasn't stopped. It has merely been reset. The standard pressures of a first marriage are absolutely nothing compared to the fierce, deeply rooted loyalties and simmering resentments that fester when two shattered worlds are forced to collide. But the collapse of a second family doesn't begin with a massive betrayal or a screaming match in the living room. It begins with a single, invisible mistake made on the very first day, a mistake almost every well-meaning parent makes without even realizing it. That invisible mistake is the delusion of the blank slate. When you walk through the front door of your new, shared home, you see a fresh start. You see boxes waiting to be unpacked and bedrooms waiting to be decorated. But you are not just moving in with your new partner and their children. You are moving in with ghosts. Every blended family is haunted by the invisible, suffocating presence of the ex-spouses. They are the unseen roommates in your new house. They dictate the weekend schedules, they complicate the holidays, and they act as a constant, underlying source of financial and emotional friction. Every time your partner's phone lights up with a text message from their ex, the temperature in the room drops. You are forced to navigate the wreckage of a past relationship while desperately trying to build the fragile foundation of a new one. And caught directly in the crossfire of this invisible war are the children. As a parent, you view this new marriage as a triumphant resurrection. You found love again. You survived the darkness of your divorce. But your children do not see a resurrection. They see a profound betrayal. In the mind of a child, their original family is not just a living arrangement. It is their entire identity, their fundamental blueprint for survival. When that structure breaks, they don't just move on because the adults decided it was time. Instead, they transform into fiercely loyal soldiers, defending a kingdom that has already fallen. To them, accepting a step-parent, let alone loving one, feels like committing ultimate treason against their biological mother or father. So, they resist. But they don't always resist with shouting or slammed doors. Usually, the resistance is quiet. It is the subtle eye roll at the dinner table. It is the sudden, inexplicable refusal to participate in a weekend outing. It is the cold, polite distance they maintain with your new partner, treating them not as family, but as an unwanted hotel guest who has vastly overstayed their welcome. This creates a devastating psychological clash under your roof. You, the parent, are practically begging your children to be happy for you. You desperately want them to see the joy and stability this new partner brings to your life. But your children are actively grieving a loss that you are celebrating as a victory. The emotional dissonance between the adults and the kids is deafening. The step-parent is left feeling completely isolated, walking on eggshells in a house that bears their own name on the lease. They pour their heart into making a connection, only to be met with an invisible, impenetrable wall of loyalty to a ghost. Meanwhile, you, the biological parent, are stretched impossibly thin. You are desperately trying to play the peacemaker, fiercely protecting your child's emotional state while simultaneously trying to validate your new spouse. It is a toxic, unsustainable holding pattern. You try to fix it with logic. You try to fix it with forced affection. You can do everything right. You can buy the perfect house, schedule the perfect family dinners, and bite your tongue when your new partner's ex pushes the boundaries. But the pressure cooker will inevitably reach its limit. And when the explosion finally happens, it won't come from the adults. It will come from the exact person you swore to protect. The explosion rarely happens on your timeline. It doesn't arrive as a grand, cinematic confrontation. Instead, it erupts in the quiet, mundane corners of your new life, a fight over the front seat of the car, a screaming match over a borrowed charger, a slamming door that shakes the foundation of the house. And when it happens, you realize the true battlefield isn't just between the adults and the children. It is in the trenches of the shared spaces. It is between the step-siblings. When you bring two sets of children together under one roof, you are not creating a supersized, happy sibling group. You are initiating a visceral, biological turf war. Think about this from their perspective. Every child in that house has recently suffered a massive structural collapse in their universe. They have already lost the stability of their original home. Now, without their consent, they are forced to share their safe space with strangers. They are forced to share the television, the bathroom, and the dinner table. But more terrifying than any of that, they are forced to compete for the one resource they are absolutely terrified of losing: your attention. This is not blending. Blending is an innocent word. Blending is what you do to ingredients to make something smooth and palatable. What is happening in your living room is an act of brutal trauma integration. The biological instinct to protect one's own resources is powerful and primitive. A fierce, us versus them, dynamic takes root in the house. Your children are constantly monitoring the environment for threats. Did your new partner discipline your daughter too harshly? Did their son get a more expensive birthday present? The children keep a meticulous, silent scorecard, measuring every ounce of affection and every dollar spent to ensure they are not being replaced. And as the kids wage this silent war, the romantic honeymoon phase between you and your partner completely disintegrates. The effortless chemistry that brought you together is crushed under the weight of competing needs. You find yourselves retreating into your biological corners. The united front you swore to maintain begins to crack. When your partner criticizes your child, your defensive instincts flare up with terrifying speed. You stop seeing them as your lover, and for a split second, you see them as a threat to your flesh and blood. The arguments shift from whispered disagreements to exhausted, bitter fights in the kitchen. The vocabulary in your house changes. It is no longer our family. It rapidly devolves back into my kids and your kids. For a highly invested parent, the guilt is paralyzing. You orchestrated this entire merger to give your children a better life. You wanted to build a sanctuary, but instead, you built a pressure cooker. The exhaustion is bone deep. You look at your partner, the person who was supposed to be your safe harbor, and you realize you are both drowning. The 67% failure rate of second marriages is no longer just a statistic you read on the internet. It is a living, breathing shadow standing right behind you in the mirror. Therapists call this the critical breaking point. It is the exact moment where the new family either forges an unbreakable bond, or fractures permanently. To survive it, you have to abandon everything society has ever taught you about love and do something that feels incredibly unnatural, something most parents are utterly terrified to try. That terrifying, unnatural step is surrender. You have to completely surrender the Brady Bunch illusion. From the moment the ink dried on your new marriage license, you likely started enforcing a deeply toxic myth, the myth of forced affection. We have been conditioned to believe that because two adults love each other, the children must instantly absorb that love by proxy. You expect them to share their space, to sit smiling at the dinner table, and to treat this brand new configuration as their true, undeniable family. But you cannot mandate love. You cannot legislate emotional attachment. When you force a child to hug a step-parent they resent, or punish them for not feeling a magical sibling bond with a complete stranger, you are not building a family. You are building a prison. You are forcing a grieving child to perform an emotion they do not feel, just to make the adults in the room feel less guilty about the chaos they created. This forced intimacy is the exact catalyst that drives that staggering 67% divorce rate. It is the poison in the well. Every time you demand that your child respect a step-parent's authority before a genuine relationship has been built, you validate their deepest fear, that their biological parent has fundamentally stopped listening to them. You teach them that their grief is merely an inconvenience to your new happiness. And the step-parent suffers just as much under this delusion. Society tells them to step in and act like a parent from day one. But when they try to enforce rules or offer discipline, they are met with a wall of pure venom. You are not my mother. You are not my father. Those words are daggers, and they are wielded with devastating precision. The step-parent retreats, feeling like an intruder in their own home, while the biological parent is left frantically trying to put out emotional fires on both sides. In response to this impossible pressure, the children will burn the house down from the inside out. They will pit you against your new partner. They will exploit every crack in your marriage until the entire structure collapses under the weight of their rebellion. So how do you stop the collapse? How do you protect your kids without sacrificing your second chance at love? You stop trying to blend. The parents who actually survive this ordeal realize that blending is a fundamentally flawed concept. You cannot take two distinct, fully formed ecosystems, smash them together, and expect them to seamlessly merge into one. The successful couples do not demand love. They do not force intimacy. They step back and accept the brutal, uncomfortable reality of their situation. They recognize that their house is not a melting pot. It is a shared boarding house. This requires an agonizing shift in perspective for a newly married couple. You have to mourn the loss of the picture-perfect family you envisioned when you walked down the aisle. You have to accept that your new spouse may never love your children the way you do, and your children may never view your spouse as anything more than your romantic partner. By completely throwing away the fantasy, a small percentage of blended families actually figure out how to survive the gauntlet. They beat the 67% failure rate. But their secret weapon isn't endless patience, and it certainly isn't unconditional love. It is a harsh, unspoken rule that holds the entire fragile ecosystem together. The unspoken rule of survival is radical detachment. It sounds cold. It sounds like the exact opposite of what a family should be. But radical detachment is the only way to stop the bleeding. In a surviving blended family, the biological parent assumes 100% of the disciplinary and emotional heavy lifting for their own children. The step-parent steps entirely out of the line of fire. They stop trying to be a mother or a father. Instead, they pivot to something much less threatening, a respectful ally. They become a steady presence in the house, like a mentor, or a friendly roommate. If a rule needs to be enforced, the biological parent enforces it. If a boundary is crossed, the biological parent addresses it. The step-parent simply backs away, removing themselves as the ultimate target for the child's unprocessed grief. And in return, the biological parent must enforce the only mandate that actually matters. Not love. Not affection. Just baseline respect. You look your children in the eye, and you give them permission not to love your new partner. You validate their fierce loyalty to their original family. You tell them, plainly and honestly, that it is okay to be angry, it is okay to be sad, and it is okay to simply coexist in parallel. You remove the suffocating expectation that this new house has to feel like a fairy tale. The moment you do this, the temperature in the room finally drops. When children realize they are no longer being forced to replace their parents, they stop fighting. When they realize their biological parent is still fiercely protecting their original bond, their nervous systems finally begin to regulate. The invisible war ends because you simply stopped forcing them to fight it. This is how you beat the terrifying statistics. You don't do it by erasing the past. You do it by giving the past enough space to breathe inside your new future. Over time, often taking years, something miraculous happens in the vacuum left by that forced affection. Without the immense pressure to perform, genuine connections begin to take root. A shared joke at the dinner table. A quiet moment of advice asked for and given. It isn't the loud, cinematic love you were sold by society. It is something much quieter. It is authentic, hard-earned trust. Blending a family is not for the faint of heart. It is a grueling marathon of trauma integration, requiring you to sacrifice your ego at the altar of your children's healing. It demands that you sit with discomfort, release your illusions, and build an entirely new definition of what a home can be. You can beat the statistics. You can build something real and lasting from the ashes of your past. But as you watch these children finally grow up, heal, and pack their bags to start relationships of their own, you have to ask yourself, which version of love are they truly taking with them?